Previously on the Fan of History, Sargon II seized the kingship of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and there was rebellion everywhere, but he beat them all up. So Sargon II is the king of Assyria for this period. He seized power in 722 BC. There were those initial rebellions in 3 directions, but all of the early campaigns were successful, and the empire is now a little more stable. While Dad is away on campaign, which he always is, Sargon's son Sennacherib stays at home. He's in charge of building the new capital. He's in charge of administration, and he just loves it. I think that they were both truly happy during these years, that Sargon loved being on campaign and Sennacherib loved building stuff. So happy Assyrians. At this time, King Midas, king of Phrygia, becomes important. So there were many pictures of King Midas. Of course, he is also a legendary figure, but it's not the same guy. But I had to go with this picture. I just love it. King Midas, rich, bearded, having fun. But this is not the King Midas that could turn stuff to gold. That's a much older legend. The Assyrians call this guy Mita, king of the Mushki. The Greeks call him Midas, son of Gordias. But that's the only reference to Gordias we ever found. So there seems to be agreement between historians that it is the same person. He is a very hard character to grasp. There are of course a lot of myths about Midas. There seems to have been 3 different kings of Phrygia named Midas. We have mentioned the Phrygians before, but I'm going to remind you about who they are. The Phrygians' capital is at Gordium. This is a site that has been excavated, and it seems to be a capital of a powerful kingdom somewhat later than this. It neighbors Urartu in the east and Lydia in the west. The Mushki is probably a tribe that is allied with King Midas, who is a Phrygian. But the rise of Phrygia here, right now, with King Midas is a bit strange. We haven't heard much about them before, but now suddenly they become a power almost on the level of Urartu as well, or at least. So no other kings of Phrygia have any documentation really that is reliable. So it's all King Midas. And perhaps Midas conquered the Mushki, that's why the Assyrians think that he is a Mushki. Or perhaps the Mushki were allied to Midas. But Phrygians and Mushki are working together. The Mushki were an Eastern Anatolian people, and they are now campaigning with the Phrygians in a joint army. Phrygia is mentioned in the Trojan War. Phrygia was rich in fortresses. Some kings are named, but yeah, not very reliable. King Midas then appears in Greek sources as well. They are of course extremely unreliable for this age. The Greeks aren't really recording what's going on until Herodotus, and that's much later. But they say that Midas married a Greek princess, Domodice, the daughter of Agamemnon of Cyme in Aeolia. Midas traded with the Greeks. I think he went to the Oracle Delphi, and the Assyrians have plenty of records of this guy. Due to the successful campaigns of Tiglath-Pileser III, the Assyrian frontier is in the Taurus range, and that is now in dangerous proximity to the domain of Midas. So Midas sees the Assyrians as a threat beyond his border, and he is about to take action. And in 718 BC, Tabal rebels. During the eponymy of Zeru-ibni, the governor of Rapsapa, Sargon has to campaign against Tabal. It seems that King Midas tried to influence Kakki, one of the kings of Tabal, to rebel. Midas gets all the blame in the Assyrian sources. It is possible that Urartu is in on this. Look at the map. Urartu is not very far away. And Urartu definitely loves when people rebel against Assyria. But let's have a look at the confusing political and geographic situation in the region in the 710s BC. The frontier is fairly flexible here, and Sargon will try to solidify it, and Midas will try to move the border closer to Assyria. Q, almost in the middle of this map, is ruled both by a local prince and by an Assyrian governor. Melid, Atuna and Tabal are still ruled by indigenous kings who are vassals of Assyria formally. These states form a diagonal line between Phrygia and Assyria, going from Melid at the upper Euphrates to Q on the Cilician coast. Ambaris of Tabal, who is loyal to Assyria, Tabal has several kings then. He marries Sargon's daughter Nabulei at some point before 714 BC. Sargon is an Assyrian king. He probably has tons of daughters, but this is at least a teenager, probably older. So she is extremely important. We get a lot of stuff from Nabulei. We even have her letters to her brother Sennacherib. In 718 BC, King Kakki of Tabal rebels. Sargon immediately marches there and he gets an instant win. The Tabal army has nothing on him. He loots Kakki's city, and the state of Sinitu, which was a part of Tabal, is given to King Kurti of Atuna, who is still loyal to Assyria. So good news for King Kurti of Atuna. As I mentioned before, 717 BC was the official founding year of Dar-Sharrukin. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, the first evil plan of King Midas has failed. But there are other small kings who are vassals to Assyria in the region. And maybe they can be persuaded to rebel against Sargon. And in 717 BC, Carchemish itself rebels. King Pisiri or Carchemish. Carchemish has been a state in itself, a Neo-Hittite state, ever since the fall of the Hittite Empire. We met Pisiri before. He paid tribute to Tiglath-Pileser in 738 BC. And we talked about Carchemish. They skillfully, diplomatically dodged being conquered by Ashurnasirpal II in the early 9th century. And they supported him. And Carchemish has played the diplomatic game quite well and is still a very important Neo-Hittite city. But now they stop paying tribute to Sargon II. So this is perhaps the time when the Neo-Hittites stop believing that the Hittite Empire is still around. It's been over 400 years since the fall of the empires, but the Neo-Hittites were going great in Carchemish, and now, of course, this is bad for them, because now finally Sargon gets the excuse to crush Carchemish. You have to wonder why Carchemish rebelled here. Because it seemed, well, Sargon was having problems in the east. Maybe he was turning his attention east. But he wasn't. So Carchemish is taken by Sargon. Pisiri and his family are carried off to Assyria, never to be seen again. The citizens of Carchemish are transported elsewhere as well. There's an Assyrian governor installed in the city, and Carchemish will still have a part to play in the saga of the Assyrian Empire. But now it turns into an Assyrian province, and the house of Astiruva that ruled Carchemish from 848 BC, or possibly from 790 BC, ends. But Midas is not done. You sort of get the feeling that Midas wants these states to die, but it's very hard to figure out why. I think he might have thought that they would succeed, but he's not helping them too much. And now it's time to work on the king Ambaris, the guy who married Sargon's daughter. Ambaris of Bit Burutash. So Ambaris became the king when Kulli died in 721 BC. And this marriage to a daughter of Sargon is unheard of. I think Sargon had great plans for this guy. That this was to be the bastion of Assyrian vassals in the area. But now Ambaris is starting to listen to King Midas, and it is possible that Sargon's daughter reports this to Sargon, because, as we told you before, there are Assyrian spies everywhere. There is the great Assyrian postal network. So she could send a letter to Sargon telling him what's happening. But Sargon is kind of busy. He is down at Nakal Musri. He's building a fortress close to the Egyptian border. This is a point that was reached by Tiglath-Pileser III in his campaign. And an Assyrian garrison is placed in Nakal Musri. And an Arab sheikh is put in command because he represents an Arab tribe that are loyal to the Assyrians. And when Sargon does this, powerful Arabs pay tribute to him. Shamshi, queen of the Arabs. We met her before. She also paid tribute to Tiglath-Pileser III. She is there paying tribute to Sargon. Sargon also takes some Arabs, and these might have been volunteers to Samaria to reduce the possibility of rebellion in Samaria. So the Egyptians now should feel threatened, but as we know, the Egyptians are not really very unified. But Osorkon IV, still in command of parts of the Delta, he meets with Sargon II in 716 BC at the Brook of Egypt, which is possibly El Arish. You have to think about Osorkon's power at this time. He is a pharaoh of the 22nd dynasty, but the 22nd dynasty is not the greatest dynasty in Egypt. It's the 25th. It's the Kushite dynasty. And Osorkon was defeated, or he paid tribute to Pie in our earlier episodes. So he is formally a vassal of the Kushites. And we don't know if he claims to be pharaoh, but Sargon thinks that he is. So Sargon speaks of Osorkon as the pharaoh. And to make Sargon happier, Osorkon gives him a present. 12 large horses of Egypt without equals in Assyria. So Sargon is happy. Wow, these are some great horses. And he lets Osorkon IV off with a warning. And it's easy to forget, but in their hearts, the Assyrians are traders as well as warriors. And now the trade route into Egypt is ensured and trade is prospering. So good news for everyone except for Osorkon IV, because this is the last time we hear about him. At some point, a few years after this, Osorkon IV dies. He vanishes into obscurity along with the 22nd dynasty. And this, of course, this whole story is based on the assumption that Osorkon IV is the pharaoh named King Shilkani by the Assyrians, and so King of Egypt from the Book of Kings. So let's look a bit deeper into this. When did Osorkon IV die? In 712 BC, King Yamani of Ashdod will seek refuge in Egypt, and he doesn't encounter Osorkon IV, which he should. There will be a later usurper in Tanis named Gemenef Konsbak, who will claim to be a pharaoh of the 22nd dynasty, but nobody cared, and we won't care either. So this is the end, probably in 713 BC or 715 BC, of the 22nd dynasty. So let us spend a little time mourning this great dynasty of Libyan pharaohs. It started so gloriously with Shoshenq I, and we covered him on this show and on the podcast. Shoshenq I became the pharaoh of Egypt, the first Libyan pharaoh of his dynasty. His uncle had been a pharaoh of the 21st dynasty. And this happened in 943 BC. The 22nd dynasty started out ruling all of Egypt. They did rule parts of Egypt at least until this point. So that's 230 years. The base of power were always Tanis in the Delta. Being in the Delta, bad for archaeology. Wet, damp conditions, things are not preserved. But now Kushite influence is spreading into the delta itself, and soon there will be no more great chiefs of the Libyans in Egypt. But not quite yet. There were 11 pharaohs in the dynasty. They were Shoshenq I, Osorkon I, Shoshenq II, Takelot I, Osorkon II, Shoshenq III, Shoshenq IV, Pami, Shoshenq V, Pedibas II, and Osorkon IV. So goodbye, 22nd dynasty. Shabaka is the pharaoh of the 25th dynasty. Last decade I told you that Pia died in 722 BC, and Shabaka is Pia's brother, but Egyptian dating always uncertain. It is possible that Pia died in 717 BC, and Shabaka starts his reign in Napata in Kush. He's in the Kushite capital south of Egypt and not in Egypt. The rulers in Egypt were humiliated by Pi and formally paid tribute to him. But with the Nubian king so far away from Egypt, the northern lords, the lords near the Mediterranean, they just go on. They remained in power after Pia left them. And they are still there. They are doing their old thing, and Shabaka is worried about this. She will have to do something about it. In 716, Sargon goes east again. After neglecting the east for 3 years, he now has to return. The troublemaker Mitati of Sikirtu, he has convinced Baghdati and Uishdish to reject Assyrian power. They are no longer paying tribute. And together, Mitati and Uishdish, they have attacked Manians who still remain loyal to Assyria. And there was a battle between the Manians, the Urartian Manians and the Assyrian Manians, fought it out at Mount Uash, where the Manian king Asa was killed at this battle, and he was an Assyrian loyalist. There is a minor Assyrian raid into this area. We have very little details for it. But this Assyrian army, not led by Sargon, it fought Baghdati and Mitati, and they managed to capture Baghdati, the king of something. Yeah, they managed to capture him at least. Was he the king of Uishdish? I think so. These Manian lords are very confusing. But Baghdati is captured and he's flayed, and the Assyrian expedition displays Baghdati's skin on Mount Uash, the scene of his former victory. Pretty grim stuff. Asa, the guy who was killed by the rebels, is succeeded by his brother Ullusunu. And Ullusunu, when the Assyrian expedition has left the area, decides that it's better to go with the Urartians than go with Sargon. So he swears allegiance to Urartu, and he also manages to get 2 other Manian rulers, Ashur-Liu of Karalla and Itti of Alabria, to join up with him in swearing allegiance to Urartu. This cannot be tolerated by Sargon, so Sargon has to go east with the full royal army. And that's of course bad news for anyone in the area. Ullusunu, the late Asa's brother then, is the target. And he can't stop the royal army. Isirtu, his capital, is captured and burned. Ullusunu begs for mercy. And on the YouTube channel, Fan of History, I have told the full chronicles of Sargon as recorded on the walls of Khorsabad. So please listen to that. You get Sargon's own story. But I will have to quote him here, because he tells you of what happened when he met Ullusunu, when Ullusunu begged for mercy. So you won't get the epic voice here that I have on the YouTube video with Sargon tells his story, but I'll try my best here without special effects. Then Ullusunu heard in his high mountains of my glorious exploits. He departed in haste like a bird and kissed my feet. I pardoned his innumerable misdeeds and I blotted out his iniquities. I granted pardon to him. I replaced him upon the throne of his royalty. I gave him the 2 fortresses and the 22 great towns I had taken away from Ursaha and Mitati. I endeavored to restore peace in his country. I made the image of my majesty. I wrote on it the glory of the god Ashur, my master. I erected many facsimiles of it in his city, the town of his royalty. So why did Sargon spare this guy? I don't know. Ullusunu probably made a pretty great case for what he did, because he lives and he will stay loyal to Sargon. And then we had these other guys, Ashur-Leo and Itti. They were also siding with the Rachans, and Sargon goes to beat them up. Their armies cannot resist the Assyrian royal army, and they are not forgiven. They can't defend themselves like Ullusunu did. Instead, they are taken in chains to Assyria and are never heard of again. Kerala is added to the province of Luluma. Alabaria is put under the authority of Bel-Apla Edina of Patira. And this guy has been loyal since before, and he's still loyal to the Assyrians. Sargon is not done yet. He continues the campaign of 716 BC. He turns southeast and conquers some cities that he adds to Parsua. Parsua is still loyal to Sargon. The city of Kishisim is captured, and Kishisim's rulers are abducted and taken away and never seen again. Sargon puts an Assyrian governor in Kishishim. He renames it Kar-Nergal and adds other captured regions to form an Assyrian province. You'd think at this stage that the problems in Mania were solved, but they are far from solved, and the Rachans are not giving up. They will still try to influence the Manians. And Sargon isn't done either, so he goes to Kharhkar, not the Kharhkar of the west, but Kharhkar of the east, spelled with a K. They had expelled their pro-Assyrian ruler in 720 BC. And one source claims that they have sworn allegiance to Dalto-Vilippi. That's weird, because Dalto-Vilippi, who has been around since the days of Tiglath-Pileser III, he has always been loyal to Assyria. And it was probably rough to be the king of Ilippi in this era. You are torn between the Manians, the Medians, and the great empire of Assyria, and then the powerful state of Elam, to which you have like ethnic relations. But Sargon II takes Kharhkar, renames it Dar-Sharrukin, not to be confused with the new capital, Dar-Sharrukin. Sargon adds territory to Dar-Sharrukin, and he makes yet another Assyrian province in the area. He takes the people of Kharhkar and resettles them elsewhere in the empire. Hopefully not at Kharhkar in the west. That would be strange. I am quite impressed by Sargon at this point. Before I really did this deep research on him, he seemed like one of the 4 great kings following Tiglath-Pileser III, but wow, he is doing really good. But we must remember that he is not changing the world he found as much as TP3 did. We also have a lot more sources for Sargon, so it might seem greater than it actually is. I wish I had a better map of this area, but I couldn't find one. Sargon isn't done yet. He will go into Media. Remember all those attacks on the Medes? Well, Sargon is going deep into Media. And after this attack, this final touch of the campaign of 716 BC, 28 rulers of Media traveled to Kharhkar to pay homage to Sargon II. What a campaign! But this campaign will be nothing compared to the great campaign of 714 BC. I will spend a whole episode on Sargon's campaign of 714 BC, and I might call that campaign Sargon's Great Adventure. But Rusa, the king of Urartu, he is pretty worried at this point. He's losing his grip on Mania, and he knows that if Mania goes, Urartu is next. After Sargon leaves the area, Rusa attacks Ullusunu because he switched allegiance to Assyria. And Rusa takes several fortresses that belongs to Ullusunu. But Ullusunu refuses to join the Urartians again. He is staying on the Assyrian side because even if Rusa can take a couple of fortresses from him, he can't obliterate his country like Sargon can. So Ullusunu is Team Sargon. And but another king, Diuku, another of this endless line of small Manian kings, he swears loyalty to Urartu. In 716 BC, King Ahaz of Judah dies. The dating for Judah, not the best. There are other years for this event. It seems that King Ahaz ruled Judah for 16 years. He has been a loyal Assyrian vassal. He has managed to dodge Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II passing by Judah. The Bible is not friendly to King Ahaz. He is said to be impressionable and that he yielded readily to the glamour and prestige of the Assyrians in religion as well as politics. So there seems to have been an Assyrian influence on religion in Judah, and that's of course not what the followers of Yahweh want. But now they have a new king. It's Hezekiah who becomes king of Judah in 716 BC. This is a popular guy in the Old Testament. Kings and Chronicles tell us a lot about Hezekiah. We can clearly deduce that Hezekiah does not agree with his dad's religious policies, because he will spend a lot of time trying to reverse the religious aberrations that Ahaz introduced. So, popular in the Bible. There are contemporary prophets, Isaiah and Micah, they cheer him on. And Hezekiah also seems to care about the remaining Jews in Israel. There are still Jews in Israel that has not been deported yet. And they are invited to Jerusalem to celebrate festivities. And Hezekiah really wants them to be part of his kingdom. So the question then is if Hezekiah will be as loyal a vassal to Assyria as his dad was. Time will tell us. Here's a fun event. In 715 BC, Luli of Tyre is attacked by some Greeks. Greek pirates are appearing on the eastern Mediterranean, attacking Phoenician shipping. Luli of Tyre is quite a diplomat. He managed to survive being besieged for 4 years by Tiglath-Pileser III, and somehow is still on his throne. Remember Arpad, it was razed to the ground after resisting Tiglath-Pileser for 3 years. Luli resisted for 4 years and he's still there. But he is now an Assyrian vassal, so he has the right to call on Sargon for help. And he does. These Ionian pirates bother the commercial interests of Tyre, and Powerful now has pretty powerful trade interests in the Mediterranean. They also dominate the political situation on Cyprus. Salamis on the Cyprus east coast is the old Tyrrhenian colony. And we've done videos talking only about the history of Cyprus. I did those with Grovey Historian. You can find them on the YouTube channel. But here, Tyre is... The other states have strong Greek connections, but they are not as powerful as Tyre. And Sargon acts. He sends Assyrian troops that probably go on Tyrrhenian boats, and they deal with the pirates. There seems to be some unrest on Cyprus, but nobody dare resist the Assyrians when they come around. Well, they haven't come around to Babylonia yet. So Merodach Baladan is still around, holding power in Babylonia. He has managed to unite all the disparate peoples of Babylonia, and he's doing a great job. And he's definitely preparing for the inevitable Assyrian attack. And I think he is kind of surprised. Where is Sargon? It's been 5 years since the Elamite king kicked some Assyrians at Deir. Why isn't there vengeance from this great Assyrian king? Okay, off to Egypt again. Shabaka now goes on campaign. He has used his brother's moderate policy for the northern lords, but that isn't working. They have to see some Kushite soldiers. And boy, do they get to see some Kushite soldiers. Shabaka and the Nubian army goes north. He defeats a guy called Bokoris. There is a scarab detailing this campaign. It's been found, reported in Assyria, bought in Jerusalem, which maybe meant that Shabaka was now sending propaganda to the Levant, preparing for a possible war with Assyria. He would not attack Assyria. I don't think he would do that, but he's scared about the Assyrians, and he should be. I will not give you full details of this campaign because we spent a whole episode on PS campaign, and that was much more colorful. But here is a quote about Shabaka's deeds. He has slain those who rebelled against him in the Southland and the Northland, and in all foreign lands. The sand dwellers languish because of him, fallen for terror of him. They came of their own accord as captives, each of them having seized his fellow, because of the beneficent acts he has performed for his father, inasmuch as he loves him. So Shabaka doing good things, and there is some evidence that Shabaka did indeed go to the north and win against everybody, because there are donation stelae in the delta that are dedicated to him. We don't really know how total this victory was, despite Pi's failure with his mild policy. Shabaka's policy seems to be pretty mild as well. The northern lords still remain in control of their fiefs, but Shabaka has the title. He's the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, who is the pharaoh. He wears the 2 crowns. But how much attention did you have to pay to this guy if you were a northern lord? Unclear. But it is possible that the 25th dynasty never really took control of the delta. The situation is entirely different in the south of Egypt. In Upper Egypt, Thebes is under Nubian control since way back then, possibly even since the days of Kashta. There is major construction happening in Thebes during the reign of Shabaka. There are accounts of Shabaka moving his capital to Memphis. They are probably not true. Memphis could be the base. Look at Memphis, it's far to the north. Memphis could have been the base for Shabaka's attack on the north. But we are not really sure where Shabaka spends his reign. Is he in Napata in Kush? There are very few traces of him there. Is he in Thebes? Well, there's a lot of construction there. He's probably not in Memphis. So if I have to choose, I would go with Thebes, which Pia didn't do. Pia just spent short periods in Thebes. But I think that Shabaka is in Thebes. He reinstates the office of the high priest of Amun that had been in abeyance. But the god's wife of Amun is still holds the highest religious authority in Thebes. And this is quite a change. Remember when the high priest of Amun ruled all of southern Egypt. That is not the case now. It's Shabaka's sister, the daughter of Kashta, the sister of Pia, Aminirdis. Here she is in all her glory. She is the god's wife of Amun in Thebes. And first she was the divine adoratress of Amun, the sort of princess to the god Amun. But now she is his wife. And well, doing good, Aminirdis. In 715 BC, Sargon has to go to the east again. Okay, Midas might be doing bad things in the northwest, but Sargon doesn't have the time to care about that. He has to go into Mania again, probably because of the Urartian attack on Ullusunu in 716. Ullusunu is very happy that he stayed on the Assyrian side, because this would have been his undoing if he had switched sides and Sargon had returned. But now Sargon is his friend, and that is a pretty good friend to have, because Sargon has no problem taking back the fortresses from Urartu. And then we have this Dioko guy, the guy who swore for Urartu. He is defeated and carried off to Assyria along with his family. And he's never seen again. Sargon now attacks Urartian territory, these fortresses. Urartian territory is creeping further and further south into Mania. And several fortresses are captured, including fortresses in Andia. The Assyrians have a pretty bad record against Urartian fortresses. But these were newly built. They were probably of Manian built, some of them. And we are pretty much still in Mania. It's difficult to know, are we in Mania or not? Because the King Yansu, king of Nairi in Kubushkia. Kubushkia is on this map and it's pretty far north. It's not far from Tushpa, the capital of Urartu. And this guy, he declares for Assyria and sends tribute to Sargon. And I love this guy. Whenever Sargon is near, he will pay tribute to him, declare for him. And when Sargon isn't there, Yansu is doing whatever he wants. But he declares for Assyria here and avoids Assyrian retribution. After this, Sargon turns southeast. If anyone in Mania or media considered siding with the Urartians, this is a pretty good argument not to do that. Kharhkar's new provinces that Sargon added to the empire last year, they are subdued again, so apparently they rebelled immediately. Sargon also goes into Media again, and the Median lords pay homage to Sargon in Kharhkar, just like last year. And these guys have to wonder, will Sargon be back in 714 BC? And oh boy, he will, because 714 BC will be Sargon's great adventure. So what about King Midas? He's still in Phrygia, he's still doing great. He will continue to work against the Assyrians. I think his plan is that if he can distract Sargon with these rebellions, then Sargon cannot gather the host of Ashur to actually conquer Phrygia. And it seems to be working for him. He has had no direct conflict with Sargon yet, though Sargon surely hates him at this point. But soon Midas will get another problem, and Midas will be back. So thank you for that. Next episode will be Sargon's great adventure. It will be great, and we will get something we haven't received before from any Assyrian king. Sargon will give us a full battle description. You can discuss this show with me here on YouTube or on Facebook, Fan of History. Check us out on Twitter and on WordPress, thefanofhistory@wordpress.com. Subscribe, like and share, that will help. And please, if you like this, support the show on patreon.com/fanofhistory. You choose a sum of money. You can pick any amount of money that you want to give Fan of History for every episode we can produce. And if we can reach $30 per episode, we are close, but we are not there yet, we will continue the podcast. Fan of History is also a podcast, and we will go beyond 701 BC. But this YouTube show will end on 701 BC. But I want to cover the 7th century BC because it's pretty amazing. It includes the final end of the Assyrian Empire, and it includes great Assyrian kings such as Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal, and I want to talk about them. So please help me with that. If you can't afford it, please share. Please like, please talk about Fan of History so we can spread this. We have been doing this for 2 years and we want to do it for 20 more. I want to do shows about history until I get so old that I can't speak anymore. Okay, thank you for watching.